And our next speaker today, a dear friend and a wonderful person and innovator, I'd like to introduce Sabra Horne, the author of Creating Innovation Navigators and the lead of the Corollary Training course and entrepreneur in residence at BMNT. So please join me in welcoming Sabra Horne.
And thank you so much, Tim. I'm thrilled to be here. And I will also say, while I was at CISA, my last role in government, the last of 15 years, I tried so very hard to bring IdeaScale to CISA. And I'm excited that you guys are doing it. I'm going to be talking about partnerships, and I can't imagine a better way to frame what it is that I'm talking about, because this is all about partnerships. So wanted to tell you a little bit about why I'm here to talk about partnerships. I had 15 years in government. The last, I was at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. My last job there was to stand up the Innovation Hub, which was, I have to say, the most exciting of all the 15 exciting years that I had. But I started not long after 2001, 9/11. I came to government to help be part of the fight, and I was excited to be able to come to that. And I was always thrown into roles where I had to do something different, and I had to engage with people, and I had to get them to do difficult things that we had never done before. First, I was at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, working open source collection. I was then at the Department of Justice, leading all of our communications and public engagement. I went to the National Security Agency, worked on some interesting things I'll tell you about. I was also Deputy Director of Information Security, Deputy Director of Information Sharing and Collaboration, and then came to CISA to help head up their engagement and stakeholder engagement and to transition the agency. So always asked to do something very different. And I realized very early on that the power of what we're able to do really is so much about being able to engage other people and to do that in a way that really expands what it is that we're doing in a way that we couldn't do on our own. And so I first wanted to ask people here, and I hope that we have a bit of a dialogue between us all. Tell me where you guys are from so that we can hear various agencies. I want to hear where you are, because I'm going to ask a question next that's going to be relevant. So tell me where you're from. Department of Labor. Okay, who else? What other places do we have here? Excellent. DISA. All right, what else? Wow, okay, great. Federal housing. Where else? Oh, DOT, fantastic. All right. Yes. Oh, welcome. We love our international partners. All right, great. And then right here. Wonderful. Okay, great. Do we have any DOD folks besides Abby? I'm not gonna. Great. Okay, wonderful. So the point I was going to make is that, as we know, so very much is going on in this world right now. However, those of us who are doing innovation, those of us who are trying to make great things happen with the workforces that we're working with, we have constrained resources. We know that we are being asked to achieve a mission in ways that we cannot possibly achieve with that which we've been given. Everything is constrained, and it feels like, whoops, feels like it is basically a ball around our leg, dragging us behind what we're trying to achieve. We cannot move forward quickly. And so the challenge really is, how do we speed up what we're doing? How do we really move forward at a totally different level so that we can make great things happen? And all of this is really about trying to make mission impact happen as much as possible. And so we are challenged. How do we move forward as quickly as possible, given all of the constraints that we have in this incredibly difficult time that we find ourselves in? So what are the challenges that we have to innovation? Let me hear your challenges, because we know you guys have them. What are some challenges? All of the things that I've listed here. However, okay, tell me what your challenge is in coming from overseas. Maybe perhaps it was actually just getting, say it again. Funding, absolutely. We know that funding is absolutely critical and that we are oftentimes limited in that which we're being given and that which we can access. And sometimes you do have a fairy godmother, a fairy godfather. That doesn't always happen. What are other challenges? Culture, say more about that. Yes, it does. That's right. That's right. That's right. Great point. Culture is always going to be a challenge unless we are in a culture that is completely focused on moving quickly with creativity and doing so in ways that achieve mission immediately. But that's almost no place. Yes. Right. Where do you start? How do you get going? How do you get moving? I've got an answer for you in a moment. So we know we have so many challenges, but how do we really move forward at a different pace? And I would say we know there are basic constraints that we are working with, right? We know that we have a certain amount of funding, and that's what we're being given. And unless we can advocate for something different, we're not going to get any more. We know we have finite staff, and unless we can somehow acquire more, it's not going to happen. And I will always hope that somehow I'll be able to make sure that the clock gets more hours to us in each day, but it hasn't happened yet. So I'm a big believer in the power of partnerships because it allows you to do things that you want to do and you haven't been able to do and you can envision, but yet you don't have the resources to do so on your own. It brings ideas to you in ways that you couldn't possibly have imagined. You have other folks who are doing amazing things in other agencies that you'd love to make use of. And this is a way I think that we can really move forward in what we're trying to achieve and get mission impact much more quickly. I will also say I've had the grand fortune of working with some folks, and I'll highlight some of the examples of partnerships I've had, and I want to hear about y'all's as well. But it's really amazing to me how you can link up with people who are doing exceptional work. And it brings to you, when you're able to partner with them, the ability to do things at a totally different level. And that teaches your folks back at home, here's how we can do this as well. So very powerful in so many ways. I am a big believer in the concept of expanding the pie. Who knows what that is? It means at the beginning of the day, we have a finite amount of resources and time and energy and money and tools and things that we're going to work with. But how do we grow that pie? By either thinking about new ideas that we can harness from outside or creating partnerships that would allow us to expand that pie. So if you think about how do I make more of what I'm doing right now, that will help you find some of these opportunities for how you might partner more effectively. Again, it makes best use of all the limited resources that we have available to us. I'll highlight some of the ways that I've grown the resources I had. I will say I'm very proud of the fact when I started at CISA, building up the Innovation Hub, I had one GS13 and $0. And at the end of the year and a half that I was doing that effort, we had achieved so very much and had gotten so very many partners brought in. So it is possible to make great things happen. I did not want to hear from any DoD people right then, because that's a rounding error, right? So this was, for me, was something that I learned late, which is you can fill gaps that you actually don't have available to you in terms of the existing skill sets that are taking place or apparent within your workforce. You can access people from other places and bring those skill sets in. You can access authorities, and this was huge for us at CISA. We had a ton of authorities at DHS, but we didn't know how to use them. So we had to work with others to figure out how to use them more effectively. We can get to the end more quickly than we could if we did it by ourselves. And sometimes we can improve the quality of the deliverables because we can work with people who are more experienced than us sometimes. So bottom line though, this is not a skill set that is taught in government. And this whole brief, and actually we have a blog that just appeared on BMNT.com that kind of gives you a little more context to all of the comments I'll make today. I came up with these ideas based on the fact that one of my wonderful folks that I get to work with, they've heard me talk about partnering and how important partnering is, blah, 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 blah. We had a 3-day course. They heard me talk about it over and over and over. They came to me and said, you know, we don't really know how to partner. Can you talk to us about what that looks like? And so I came up with the comments we're going to hear today, and I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have some other good ideas. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts about how you've made some good partnerships happen. But we've not been taught these skill sets, so we need to learn them, and we need to figure out how to help pass these to all of our colleagues. So let me give you a little bit of a case study. When I was at CISA, I was asked to stand up innovation from scratch. What might this look like? I will say that I was given the luxury of time, 2 months, to basically call all kinds of people. I'm sure we talked to Abby way back when, and find out what's all that's taking place across the US government in innovation. What does it look like? How's it operating? What capabilities do we have? And so I learned a ton. What I learned is there is so very much going on out there. And me, myself, and I, and my dear colleague who is GS13, we could make use of all of those great resources we had available to us. So I immediately started creating partnerships. And the first that I undertook was calling up DIU, which had amazing capabilities and amazing authorities, especially the Commercial Solutions Opening Pilot Program, which also DHS had available to us. We just didn't know how to use it. So I called up Mike Madsen, and we had a fantastic chat. And basically, we were able to craft a partnership where I was able to send the gentleman at CISA who was in charge of enterprise architecture. He went and learned how to use CSO. He had also had a background in acquisition. So what a perfect person, right? An IT and an acquisition background to make incredible use of that. So we were able to learn the lessons and get much faster at being able to use that authority. Next, we were also able to work with Air Force, which was amazing. And we got a capability called CREAS. And we were able to use the CSO authority to purchase that. So we worked with the procurement innovation lead at DHS. We worked with our emergency communications division. We were able to bring about this great, rich collaboration that we wouldn't have been able to build together. And we were able to buy that in 18 days. So thank you, Air Force, and thank you, the partners at CISA. We had some other great experiences as well, but it was all about putting together collections of people that resided in different organizations, different agencies, and outside of the federal government as well to make some great things happen. All right. So I'm a believer in that successful partnerships are about really understanding what you're doing, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. Because if each of the partners don't understand how they can play a role, we are all going to be lost at the end of the day. All right. I wanted to first hear a little bit about some of the good partnerships that you all have created and how you've been able to do that. So any volunteers that want to talk about something they're excited about? Oh, thank you so much, Lizzie. Yes, I know you've got a good one you're thinking of. Oh, you guys, okay, I'm just going to start calling on people. Good for you.
Okay. A couple years ago, we, as the Department of Labor, we call them dialogues, but they're public facing when we use IdeaScale platform. And most of our dialogues are internal to Department of Labor. We partner with other agencies. However, we did partner once with the Department of Transportation. And we launched a dialogue to gather ideas on how to make autonomous vehicles more accessible. And this is under, the Office of Disability Employment Policy. So majority of our dialogues are focused on how, incorporating disability policy within that. We also are going to launch another dialogue with Department of Transportation coming up in a few weeks. And that's going to be on how to innovate and advance the public transportation systems to make them more accessible to people with disabilities so they're able to get to work easier now, in our post-pandemic era.
So it sounds like you were looking for people who were doing things that were related to where you wanted to go, where you thought you could go, and somebody who was going to be able to get you there as well.
Exactly.
There you go. So that's what it's really all about, is being able to figure that out quickly. And so I would first start with enter a partnership with a great, willing attitude. This is also not a skill set that's taught in government very much, which is lean forward, be excited, show enthusiasm, show that you want to make this happen. I've seen so many meetings where people freeze up and get frigid because they're afraid they're going to break rules, or they're going to somehow get in trouble, or they don't really understand the constraints of what it is they're doing. But if you show enthusiasm about what you're doing, that is going to get you so far, and you can work through the difficulties in ways that you couldn't possibly have before. I think this is a big, big piece of it, which is do your homework before you go into the engagement, because if you understand what you're willing to give and what you feel comfortable with and what your objectives are and your goals are, and you understand a little bit about your partner as well, and you feel comfortable, you'll be able to gain so much more from that conversation, and they'll feel enthusiastic about being part of that as well. So understand what it is that you're willing to give, what you're not willing to give, what your red lines are, where you're not going to go. I mean, certainly I've spent a lot of time in the intelligence community. Obviously, you've got very great concerns about domestic versus international. You've got concerns about US persons information. Those are all things that we have to take into consideration and really ensure that we've thought carefully about it. But also know what you're good at. What do you all do well, and what can you bring to the table? But also, what are you weak at, and how can you shore those up in a totally different way? And so I will say I do count, I'm a big fan of contractors. And so I see them as partners as well. I don't see them as others. So I wanted to highlight one really important partnership that we had when I was at CISA. I was asked to oversee the organizational change from the previous agency to the new component agency. And we were supposed to understand the full range of personnel, resourcing, how it broke down across the entire organizations. But I will tell you, we probably didn't have the best understanding of that. So we were able to find a company that had a bunch of engineers. Thank you all so much. It's called IT Cadre. They did a fantastic job of helping us really understand at the most granular level things about our organization in terms of where money resided and all of this. We wouldn't have known on our own. We could have spent years trying to do it. They helped us so very much. So again, find what you need, find who can make that happen, and bring that to you to shore up your own weaknesses. It's about finding what you're comfortable in and making those things happen as well. I wanted to highlight one other thing. What are the goals that you have? Sometimes you can't achieve your goals unless you're able to work with someone else. So I was chief of staff at the National Maritime Intel Center, and we were charged with creating a unification of maritime intelligence across the community in a way that had never been done before. But yet we had basically only 66 people to do that. So we're not going to know all of the entirety of maritime intelligence across the community. So we're going to have to work with Navy and Coast Guard and FBI and all of these other agencies to really bring together a powerful union of that information. So for the first time ever, we created a 4-seal analytic report, and we're able to bring together the resources from all of these various agencies that created a more powerful understanding of a principle than we would ever have had on our own. So I think that's a great example of the kinds of things that we want to make happen. Also, think about what you might do together. What are you trying to achieve? What can you not do on your own? Dream big, dream about what you might be able to make happen. There are amazing things that can happen if you only think creatively about what is my goal and where am I trying to go. One of the opportunities I had when I was at the National Security Agency, I came 5 days after Snowden released the classified information. It was on a small team of people who had to help work that issue. We understood that the American public didn't understand what the National Security Agency did at all, because back then, this was 2013, we were NSA, no such agency. Nobody had ever heard of NSA. They didn't know what we did. They didn't know how we worked. They didn't know that we followed rules. They didn't know that we had 100 compliance lawyers that helped us each and every day. I promise you, each of us said the word compliance probably 5 times in a day. How crazy is that? So my big goal was, how do we help really the public understand what we're doing better? So there were 2 key partnerships that we made happen. One was, I happen to know the gentleman who was at the NCIS department, communications department, and y'all heard of the show NCIS, right? It was the best-selling show, most popular show on the planet for many, many years. So worked with the producers of NCIS to help create NSA characters. There were 2 characters. They eventually became part of the ongoing effort, and they appeared time and time and time again. They were based on 3 analysts, 3 young women within NSA, an exciting time that we were able to really communicate about, here's what this agency is doing, and here's how they operate, and they're not breaking laws. So that was a partnership we could have never thought of unless we had really dreamed big. Another one that was really so very important during that time was we worked with a group of folks who basically did a pulsing of social media. And back at 2013, this was a big deal. They pulsed papers and they found out, here's what the American public is thinking. And they were able to help us craft messaging so that leaders were able to really communicate that in a different way. So again, think big, think about what you might be able to make happen. And how do you create a partnership so that everybody gets something out of it? Again, we already talked about the importance of attitude. You really want to make sure that you are helping move forward the relationship in a totally different way. If you're hesitant, if you're nervous, if you don't know what your boundaries are, you're likely to be communicating that quite frequently. So during the engagement, you also want to think about, how are we exploring all of the opportunities here, and how are we moving forward in a totally different way? And so the point I wanted to make here was, I think a great example of how you might be able to bring together different people is to think about specific areas where you're missing, where somebody else is needing this. And so when I was at CISA and the election task force was stood up, we had to really help understand, for the 2016 presidential elections that had been penetrated by Russia, how do we help the states understand what is taking place? But the states didn't have access to any of the intelligence. So we were able to help partner with the intelligence community and bring the state and local representatives of election infrastructure, bring them to bear so they could understand the intelligence. We gave them clearances for a day and they were able to see the information. So again, it was utilizing another agency to help bring together the power of the intelligence community. And make sure everybody's pulling their weight. Sometimes you have partners that want to partner and maybe they don't want to do so very much, but everybody's responsible, right? Misunderstandings can happen. So the better you can document what it is that you're doing, whether it is informally or formally, that helps clarify things, and everybody is sharing that information so you know exactly what everybody's responsible for. Roles and responsibilities, right? We've got to know who's doing what, when it's due, how you're going to make something happen, because otherwise it will fall through the cracks. And you want to anticipate problems. And I was a little hesitant about putting this part in here, but let's be honest, nothing ever goes according to plan, right? Oftentimes you've got challenges that you can't possibly have envisioned, but if you think about what those things might be before they happen and you watch for signs, you can be much more anticipatory of how you might be able to ward off something that is coming down the road that you hadn't actually envisioned. And there are a lot of different ways you can see various signs of what that might look like. Lack of transparency is one that's, I think, a big sign for me that maybe things aren't going exactly the way they need to. And so you want to really be specific, but this is all about communication, right? Good communication and making sure you understand what we all have agreed to. You're communicating and you're stating your needs very frankly and easily. All right. Any examples of great partnerships that you all want to highlight? And because I'm going to call on you guys, you know I'm going to. Okay, gentlemen, right here. Tell me your name. Nick, tell me about a partnership you have and why is it successful and why is it not?
Sure. So when I was working in consulting, which is service-oriented industry, not a lot of technology, but starting about 10 or 20 years ago, technology really started mattering. So the consulting firm I was with at the time, McKinsey, they partnered with a couple of engineering firms that would then do all the data sciencey aspects of the analysis. And then McKinsey would do the consulting part. And so there was a basically partnership in going out and serving real organizations, the IBMs, the Hewlett Packards, the General Motors of the world, but combining both the technology aspect, which these technology firms had experience with, and then the soft human consulting aspect that firms like McKinsey did.
Okay. What do you think made that so successful?
I think both organizations realized that they had a skill set that the other organization didn't, and they also did not want to compete against each other and encroach. So there was a trust that, hey, you're not going to compete against me or steal what I'm doing, and I'm conversely not going to do what you're going to be doing.
That's exactly right. So it's finding exactly what everybody is able to succeed at, bringing people together and moving forward together. Okay, I'm going to start going back in the back now. Yes, I love that.
This is a kind of outdated example now, but it's and it's easier because it's actual stuff. But after Hurricane Sandy, there was a lot of snow in places that was blocking roads and a lot of people that had downed wires. And normally electricians do wires and Public Works or the county or government does the snow plows, but neither one could do their job because it was hazardous. And so they created strike teams, which required bending policies and doing things that were never done before. So they had a police car, so it was a safety patrol to help, make it safe, and then a public utility worker that could do the electrical work, and then somebody who was skilled and licensed to use a chainsaw. So they created these strike teams, and it was, now it makes total sense. I was like, oh yeah, that's how it should work now, but 15 years ago, we had never done that before.
That's right. And so you brought together a group of folks who had a complementary set of skills, couldn't have done it otherwise. And you're able to identify also the gaps. Wait, we're missing somebody who can do the plowing. So we need to bring that person in as well. Great example. Other examples. I see you thinking. Yes.
Yeah, we have several examples. So
good.
We're a wastewater treatment provider in the Denver area. I don't know, you guys hear me okay? And there's a number of opportunities or examples from internal collaboration, internal partnerships, because we also are challenged with a lot of siloing within our organization. And how do we get out of those silos and collaborate effectively just for any project to be delivered? But I can provide maybe a couple more specific examples just regionally where we partnered with other organizations. So one's kind of fresh on my mind because we were talking about this a little bit earlier as it relates to wastewater thermal energy usage and sewer heat recovery, partnering with the city and county of Denver and the National Western Center, which if you're not familiar with Denver, the National Stock Show is in Denver every year, and the National Western Center is the complex where that stock show is hosted. And they went through a major redevelopment effort, and this was a partnership that worked really well because there was a challenge that we were both able to solve through the extraction of a resource. And for us, it helped with permit compliance in a roundabout way. So two challenges that we were able to both contribute directly to
Perfect. It was finding those common goals and being able to get there more quickly. That's exactly right. Perfect. Just a few more things. I think we've got Lizzie. What's our time? Yeah, 5 minutes. Great. Make sure that you're measuring what happened. How did it work? What went well? What didn't go well? What are we trying to achieve? How well did we achieve it? Who achieved their goals? Who did not achieve their goals? And how can we improve this going forward? I think oftentimes we get to the end of a project and we're so grateful that it's done, it's over, move on, don't look back. But how often do we try to do the same types of partnerships, but yet there's no record of what happened? We don't have an understanding of what happened. We only have vague recollections of, yeah, that went well. Well, why did it go well? What didn't go well? Because inevitably something is not going to go well. So how do we really take that information and make it work for us in the future? And how do we as we're moving through the project, adjust what it is that we're doing so that we can tweak and refine as we go so it gets better and better, right? The whole goal is to get consistently more speedy as we go through the process to accelerate what it is that we're trying to do to achieve mission more effectively. Compare before and after so you can see, all right, did we make any progress? Did this really help us in any way, or is it just probably something that didn't matter at all? But I'm a big fan of, it's always about communications. If we don't really communicate what it is that we're doing, we might as well not have done it at all. Analyze what worked, share that around, and modify what you're doing in the future based on what you learned so that you can do this differently going forward. So I think we've got questions still. So want to hear from you guys. What did we learn? What do we need to learn? What are questions that you have about how we might be more effective in bringing that mission impact in a totally different way? Yes.
Just for the people out virtually, I want them to hear that too. It was, how do you find?
That's right.
Sorry, you have laid out all these criteria for identifying a partnership, assessing its success after the fact. But ex ante, if you realize that you have a need that you're not able to satisfy yourself, how do you find the appropriate sets of partners in the first place?
Perfect. Thank you, Nick. So I think you go back to the very beginning, which is understanding what it is that you're trying to achieve, what your goals are, what your challenges are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what your gaps are. If you look at your gaps and you understand the panoply of where you are, you're able to identify more easily on your own, here's what I need to fill, here's where I can go. And you also need to be talking to a ton of people, because what you're really looking for are the opportunities. And you never know in that sidebar conversation that you're going to have in just about 10 minutes when we move to the next part of our enjoyment today. You'll never know unless you're aware of your own gaps and needs and goals. You may hear a data point that pops up and you're like, wait a minute, Abby, that's right. I forgot you're working on blank. I've got an idea. Let's try this, right? So you always are looking, spanning the horizon for the opportunities all the time. And now the challenge is how do you take that panoply of opportunities and how do you really start to turn it into something real? And you want to have, just like we know the world of venture capital works, right? You want to have 10 times what it is you want to make happen before you really start to move through the wickets of, is this going to work? Do our goals match? Do we have similar interests? Do we have similar ways of achieving something? Are we going to be able to make a good collaboration here? The challenge really is if you're not able to go together and move forward together, it's not going to work. So find out soon, find out early, move through it and move on. I will say, you highlighted the CISA example earlier. I was so proud of myself when I was doing all that work. It was a ton of work. We got so much done. But at the end of the day, I realized I didn't have enough opportunities working, because if I achieved all 4 of the big giant things I was working on, I should have had like 15 things that totally bombed. But I didn't realize, right, that it could have turned into something, but it didn't. So I needed to try harder. So I just needed to work more. That's all it was. So, all right. Other questions? That was a great one, Nick. Good. Thank you.
So you cite partnerships as an avenue to achieve a goal more quickly, but do you think that there is a level where there are too many people involved or too many cooks in the kitchen where it actually takes a longer time to get into an agreement? Yeah. And if so, how do you identify the optimal number of partnerships to achieve a goal?
That is such a great question. So how do you identify the right number of partners for a partnership? Sometimes it's more important to have that number of partners than it is to actually achieve the goal. When I was at D&I, I was asked to create the cybersecurity intelligence and analysis plan. And I was asked to partner with some of the agencies, the 17 agencies across the community. I figured because we were trying to use that as a template, not only for the entirety of the community, but we were also trying to establish a template for what had to happen in cyber. It was more important to have buy-in from as many of those agencies that actually did cyber than to actually get something done quickly. So it did take us about 6 months, and it was a ton of churn and back and forth, but I found allies and I found people to work with, and I found people who could help get us to the right place and convince people back at home, here's how we have to make this happen. So it's a balance. Sometimes you do want something to happen quickly, and you have to be able to find a partner who can help you achieve that quickly. Sometimes it's way more important to get the 17. Good question. All right, what else? Oh, now I'm coming back there. I know I'm going off screen. It doesn't matter. All right. Okay, what do you have?
No, you're okay. I'm curious if you have any experience in situations, especially in like discovery-based projects, where you have had partnerships either sour or goals and objectives start to diverge in the middle of a project.
That never happens, ever, 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 ever. And so, but you said exactly the key word, which is when you are doing discovery and you're finding out about potential partners, you want to do that discovery as fast as possible, right? Because if they're not going to be the right partner, you want to know early on. You want to move through it as quickly as possible and realize, wow, this is not a match. Let me pursue something else. So it's that fine line of digging deep, really understanding, really seeing if there's potential there. But sometimes you get to the roadblock and you're just not able to make the same thing happen. So do it quickly. All right, what else? Okay, I'm coming back there. All right, Robert, I know the water department has no problems at all. Okay. What questions do you have?
Yeah, I want the
Yeah, you
mic.
do. You had a great example you told me about earlier. But
I mean, the one that's off the record, that
that
example?
one.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay, yeah,
exactly.
okay. So restate the question, please.
Tell me what questions do you have about partnerships, and have you had a partnership that you've not been able to work through, and what's your question about how you could have done that differently?
Well, I think we've all experienced partnerships where we're not all on the same page. And there's some people that are just closed-minded and just are not open to any change whatsoever. So they can be a cancer to a group. There's no value add. So it's kind of dealing with that and knowing how to recover from it. So what are some of your best practices?
Honesty, just I can see the potential here. I can see where we might be able to go. However, I'm not sure you're in the same place I am in regards to X, Y, and Z. Tell me about that. So I think just knowing in your gut what is going on and then being able to articulate it, that is so powerful. And it's also, right, that's not always a skill set that we learn in government all the time too, right? Which is so much faster and easier to just be super upfront about here are my needs and here's where I'm going. Are you going the same place? There you go. All right.
We have a question.
We got one more question.
Can anyone speak to forming internal partnerships within your agencies? We're CIO, so we're the base of technology. Everybody comes to us, right? But what about your other directorates or departments or divisions? How do you overcome some of those challenges?
I think that's so important and so powerful. And so one of the things I did when I was at CISA was as soon as the Innovation Hub was announced, I started collecting the people who reached out to me and said, oh my goodness, I'm so excited about what you're doing. I want to help you. The first person who called me, bless his heart, he was from CIO. And he was the head of enterprise architecture. And he turned out to be not only a fantastic partner, but we became dear friends. And so it's finding those like-minded people in those various places. And my plan was always basically lay down the org chart and make sure that you have friends all over that org chart everywhere and at different levels, right? Because we know what is being said at the senior level is not what's being said at middle management and not at the workforce level, right? And so you have to understand what's going on down here. How do I get the ear up here? What are the roadblocks to making this happen? So it's finding those allies, bringing them together. I created both within CISA as well as within DHS. I created the formal groups that got together on a biweekly or monthly basis to share information about innovation and ideas about innovation. So it got them excited. It showed them there was progress. It showed them there was forward movement. And then we also sought input from them about what are you all that are doing that's innovative. And so it got them bought into the process. And then they would go back home and talk about within their own organizations, wait a minute, did you hear about blank? So, right, you're trying to create that wind beneath the sails of people who are interested in innovation so that they can go and spread your message for you. So great question. Yeah, Abby, good.
So thank you for letting me add to that from the ensign perspective. So we have a very distributed team who have a very, very strong bias for action. And so one of the things that we have found is aligning in the incentive structure. So making sure that each element of the organization is moving in the same direction within the line that we need them to be focused in on, and helping to ensure that they are very clear. One of the tools that we have used is a RACI chart. So innovation is very messy. It's very abstract. And like I said, when people have a bias for action, they just move on out. And when they're distributed, you may not find out about that until many months later. And so when you think in advance and you work through the RACI chart, right? Who's responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed, it helps to ensure that everyone knows what they should be focused in on. And then on the back end, when you work on your metrics, you help to ensure that you're incentivizing the collaborative, cooperative behaviors that you want to see for the ultimate objective.
Thank you, Abby. So nice to hear from a fellow innovator. All right, everybody, I'm excited to see the partnerships that you all make happen. If you need anything, give me a holler, and I thank you for being here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.